Hello and welcome to Homeschool University, where life meets learning. That's right. Welcome to part 2 of my Choosing Math Curriculum series. That's right. Last week we had part 1, which was I gave you an evaluation kind of assessment framework so that you could determine which kind of math curriculum will work best for your student. What would be the concept method of approach in it? How would things be presented? All of that, okay? By the way, if you haven't watched that video, you haven't watched that part 1 video, you need to stop, put the brakes on right now. Turn this one off and go watch part 1. I'll put a link to it right up here. But you need to go watch part 1 because otherwise about half of what I'm going to talk about today is going to make absolutely no sense to you at all, and you're not going to get much out of this. So just saying, you need to go watch that. All right, but this week, for those of you that already watched part 1, we are going to go right into curriculum. That's right. We are going to go hands-on. We're going to determine what kind of curriculum is going to fit the bill for your student. And I'm using reviews of tried and true products here. These are things that either I have used with my children or I have used with other families that I've done homeschool counseling with. So I know how these products work. I know an awful lot about them. And I'm just going to help you match what your student needs and what curriculum will give math to your student in the way that they need to receive it. That's right. So, hey, let's get started. So we're going to get into those curriculum reviews at this point. I'm going to do these a couple of different ways, and you're not going to see my face on the screen for a little while. First off, I'm going to start with materials that are either online or that I just don't have samples of in my lending library anymore. Just going to give you a quick peek at those online. And then we're going to get into books I do have. And I'm going to show you actually what's inside. We're going to go through some sample pages just so you can really see them. Now, why is it important that I'm doing this? Well, because as soon as I get done looking at these products, we're going to dive right into this swell Excel spreadsheet that I made, because I never use those, right? Oh, yeah. So I got this Excel spreadsheet that's really a chart matching curriculum to what kind of learner slash aptitude slash attitude child you have, okay? It's going to match all that up, but we're going to run through that chart really quickly. So that's why I want to show you the curriculum up front so you have some idea of what I'm talking about before we get to the chart. And by the way, you'll notice one thing missing off the chart. Last week I talked about right brain learners. I did not put them on the chart because I'm actually going to talk about them totally separately at the end of this. So hang on if you got a right brain child. This stuff also will apply to you, but I've got an extra little bit for you. So let's get into those reviews. Ooh. So this is teaching textbooks. That's where we're going to start here. This is pretty much at this point an online subscription type of math program. You can get their prior version still on books and CDs, but this is the way most people are going to use it. You've got number one, you've got the little character figure over here that's going to kind of walk your child through everything. Then you've got the lecture itself, the lesson, which is usually illustrations. It can be some text, and then it's going to be, of course, a voiceover talking through it. And then the various practices, which would be answering the questions, putting the answers down below, actually solving the problems, right? You've got the lessons here. Just a kind of an example, this is what a lesson would look like written out. And again, the speaker will walk through it, so there is that audible component to it. So that's teaching textbooks. Next, we have CTC Math. This one really is strictly online. This actually is a company from Australia. but it's just a very straightforward math curriculum. You've got a tutorial that you can see is just pretty much a bare bones presentation of the lesson. And then you've got either interactive questions, just like in teaching textbook, or you can actually print out worksheets for your children to work the problems that way. They include also these little one-page summaries, which are kind of cool, that just sum up the lesson that your child just learned, anything that they might need to remember from it. And then they're going to give you, after the questions have been answered, the actual worked out solutions, so that you can keep track of that. So it has, when you do the lessons, it's got a voiceover over it, but it's got pretty much just, it relies heavily on the visual. So that is CTC Math. Next up, this is a book that is actually a book. I just don't happen to have it on my shelf, but this is the latest edition of Singapore Math. They're calling it Math in Focus now. I just want to give you a quick peek into this. Singapore Math is pretty similar to, it's your basic textbook math, but they take a slightly different approach to it. And it is very colorful inside. You've got these, like this is counting by 100,000s, but look at all the colorful charts the way they've done this. And even you look at another page, they take this even farther. I mean, it's just, it's very colorful. It's presented in a very straightforward way. Obviously, the lessons are actually presented in the book itself for the child. Okay, this is an idea of what you're looking at. But at the same time, there is a teacher's manual. Essentially, we're looking at the homeschool edition here. So there are extra helps in the teacher's manual for the teacher to help teach it. That would be you. But it's basically kind of a slightly novel approach, very colorful, but it's still a textbook, and that's what it is. And now, last of all, we have that homeschool favorite, the standby for all the ages. That would be Saxon Math. Yeah, that's right. Tell you what, if you went to public school or private school as a student yourself, Mom, you had a textbook that looked just like Saxon Math. It is a textbook. It has a ton of review, and it's very cyclical. You never stop getting the same sort of problems. It sort of presents something new, gives you a little bit of the new, and then you do a whole bunch of review problems. That's a textbook. That's how it works. Rainbow Resource Center, that's where we are here, has the Home Study Kit, which has basically got fact cards, teacher's manual, a meeting book, which has some like opening exercises for the student to get started with, and then the student books themselves. This can be very high maintenance for the mom to teach because the text isn't super thorough. There are no additional materials to flesh it out. So pretty much you got to work with that. Now, grades kindergarten through third grade, Saxon also has manipulatives that you buy. These manipulatives are required. They are different for each grade level. You know, I used Saxon in the younger years for one of my kids, and I didn't find their manipulatives super helpful, but they were manipulatives nonetheless, and they weren't bad. So this is your basic textbook math, nothing fancy here, just getting to the facts. That's kind of the size of it. Ooh. We're going to start with Life of Fred. This book happens to be pre-algebra 1, but notice with biology. He's using biology topics to teach pre-algebra. That in and of itself is pretty unique. Plus, it gives you a little hint of what you're in for. It says, as serious as it needs to be. By the way, this guy right here, that's Fred. He is a 5.5-year-old who lives in one of the math offices at Kitten's University because he's a professor there at 5.5, right? It's just a lot of fun. This is a very different way of doing math. Life of Fred is all about story problems. So like, this is a good example. Literally, he's telling a big story using a bunch of biology concepts, right? And then gets to the end and says, okay, now he uses a section called Your Turn to Play. And he'll give the problem and a complete solution to it right on the page. Because Stanley's idea here is that, the author's idea, is that the child needs to be able to see it rather than doing it wrong and then embedding that in their brain. But this is really all about story problems. And by the way, he does a really cool thing. Up in the start of the book, he really walks through what he is to expect in the book for your student. And then he actually gives them an idea of how to use the book. It's a lot of fun. It's a very irreverent way of doing math. Definitely applies to a certain kind of student, but a lot of interesting stuff in there. By the way, there are some homeschool helps with that definitely flesh it all out so it's a complete curriculum. All right, now we're going to look at Mequon Math. Mequon Math is for the younger kids. Mequon, I'm looking at either kindergarten to second grade or usually first through third grade. There are 6 books here. Okay, we got the red, the orange. Actually, this is reversed. Orange and then the red, then yellow, then green, then blue, and then purple. The idea is that you're going to use 2 books per year for 3 years, okay? So we're just going to look at the lower level books just for a second to kind of give you a feel of how Mequon looks. This is the very first Mequon book. So this would be the one that your first grader starts with. And right off the bat, they're working on numbers, but then, they're doing all kinds of different methods. And they're doing things in ways that a child this age is going to find interesting, right? We come up here, and now look at the topic that's being taught here. We're touching on polygons. This is in the first grade book, and we're already doing polygons. And your child is going to understand it from what's come in front of it. This is very cool. The later books in here, you're really touching on advanced multiplication and division, but in such a way that it's always presented so a young child can grasp it. It's not just a bunch of math problems, obviously not. The red book, which comes the next book of second grade, you'll see this a lot. He gives you pages, or they give you pages, so that you can make a little book. This is my fractions book. And there are all kinds of fun little activity pages that then can be pulled out of the book and stapled together, and you have made your own little book out of it, right? I really like to think of Mequon as the Montessori method for teaching math. It kind of is. Requires a fair amount of teacher prep. On the back here, it notes things you're going to need. Notes to teachers, lab sheet annotations, and first grade diary. The first grade diary, by the way, is really useful because it kind of fleshes out how you would teach that first year. But you have to get these materials. I have them loaned out currently, or I would show them to you. But you really can't do Mequon without them because you have to teach the lessons for your child, and then you move from there. All right. Next up, we have an algebra course. Since we just talked about the younger kids, we're going to look at algebra, which is with Video Text Interactive. Video Text Interactive starts with pre-algebra and goes all the way up into calculus. So this is not for the younger kids. But this is actually for the very first module, the very first section of algebra. This is the instructor's guide with detailed solutions for the progress test, which I'll show you in a little bit. But this particular one, this has just got your quizzes in it, but with complete solutions written out. Everything is given so that you can help your child with this. Now, going backwards a little bit from there, obviously the lessons are taught on these DVDs, okay? These are actually, they've got a teacher on them teaching the lesson, and then when your child's done watching the lesson, then they move back into the books. These are those progress tests that were spelled out in the teacher's manual. This is a solutions manual. This is simply for the daily work. Again, notice everything is completely worked out. Really needs to be. Then this is the actual student work text. This is where your student gets kind of a review of what they're doing and then gets right into the exercises that they need to do. And that's kind of how that's set up. This last one, course notes. This can be really useful because it just reminds certain things that are definitely always the same, kind of rules to live by, like this. Yeah, this is just kind of a cheat sheet, if you will. Now, one thing you need to know about Video Text Interactive is that it teaches algebra concepts not in a traditional, I keep doing that, sorry, not in a traditional method. It kind of jumps around a little bit. So if you've been doing something else for algebra, with this you're going to want to start at the beginning because odds are topics that you've been covering are going to be different from what they put you in. So just saying, that's a little word of caution, more so than other curriculum that I have used. Next is just, this is a weird example. This is actually a science, but this is a work text. And I just wanted to show you, if you've never seen a work text, how they work. The idea is that the lesson, everything the child needs is presented, and then it's followed by the exercises the child is supposed to do. That's why they call it a work text. It's not only got the text of the lesson in it, but it's also got the actual student work in the same book. Normally they're very skinny little things like this, and there are a lot of them, you know, for any given subject matter like math or whatever, science. The last one that I'm going to show you here today is going to be Matthew C. Okay, this happens to be the Gamma book. Matthew C goes all the way up to calculus. This one is multiplication, because each book for Matthew C focuses on mastery. So they're going to present a specific area of mastery in each book. In other words, you're not going to get multiplication and division in the same book. This is multiplication, and that's what's going to be experienced here. So you have the DVD, which has all the lessons on it. Steve Demi, there's his smiling face, presents all the lessons. He is a wonderful teacher. The lessons are not super long. They're usually anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes long. This is a teacher's manual, which you're going to need. The teacher's manual gives you each lesson exactly as he presented it on the DVD, including the visuals that he might have used, right? This is super important, because if you have to help your child and you can't quite remember how Mr. Demi did it, there you go. It also has in the back, just like with Video Text Interactive, you're always going to have the complete solutions. So you know exactly where the mistake was made and how to fix it, right? So that's the teacher's manual. I've also got the student text here. The student text has got a really cool feature to it, which is these lessons. You'll notice up here it says 16A. Okay, this is the first lesson. My son had fun with this, by the way. Can you tell? The first lesson in lesson 16, the first page of practice. It's one page. Okay. Then you have another one for the next day, again covering exactly the material that was in the lesson. There is no review here. There is the lesson and the third page, right? Then you get into the review pages. These review pages will cover everything that's gone on so far. Notice, by the way, you always are getting some story problems, some word problems. That's super important. But see, they have D, E, and F are the review pages. And a cool thing about Matthew C is that if your child does the first review page and they ace it, why would you do the other two review pages? Whereas if your child is still struggling with a prior concept or some way, it just is a really solid review for them. Same thing with the lessons. Your child, if they are a super math whiz, can just breeze through these and do, I usually made my kids do 2 lesson pages. If you aced them both, you didn't have to do the third one. But that's kind of it. Now, here's a unique feature of Matthew C. Just gotta grab my bin here. And that would be blocks. That's right. These are awesome. These are what he uses in the videos to teach. Notice that each one of these, they're different colors, they're different lengths, denoting different numbers, right? These are invaluable. And he has other manipulatives when you get up into the algebra level, but these are what makes Matthew C amazing, because you've got the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic all together in one book. So that's Matthew C, and those are the resources that we're going to be talking about now as we get into the math chart. Woohoo! So now that we've had a really good look at all of the materials that I'm bringing to you today, we're going to go to my math chart. That's right, to show who needs what. As you notice, I have the 3 primary categories across the top. These would be learning styles. I use those as primaries because it kind of makes sense. Learning style is the place where you start. Then we come down here and we've got aptitude, each section of aptitude, high, average, and low, because that's the next important marker for what kind of math curriculum to use. And then the last one would be their attitude, whether they like it or they're indifferent or they dislike it, right? So let's just walk through these. So visual, high aptitude, and they like math. Yeah, Life of Fred would be a lot of fun because this kid gets it. So why mess around with conventional math? Why not just go to something that's totally different? Some kids are going to dislike it because it's got that story aspect, but most of these kids enjoy it and it's highly visual. Then you've got Matthew C. as another great choice because that covers the visual basket really well. And for a kid who is really good at math, you can really tailor how many pages of what they're doing. Last one in this category for very visual learning would be CTC math. CTC is not super thorough, so that's why I put this into the high aptitude, because your kid really has to get math to get a lot out of CTC. So next in the visual category, high but an indifferent attitude. Yeah, Matthew C, again, because you can limit how many pages you're doing. And Singapore, because Singapore is colorful, it's a little bit different. A kid that's indifferent to math, hey, it might make them a little more interested, you never know. But definitely Singapore is for a high aptitude because they cover topics a little differently than we do here in the US, even though it's kind of a US version, just saying. Then we have visual, high aptitude, but they just don't like math. This is kind of a rare category, but those kids are out there. For these kids, again, we go back to Life of Fred because, hey, it's different. It doesn't feel like math. Might help the attitude. Matthew C. And then Singapore, again, because it looks a little different, so it might help. Then you have the auditory learners, high aptitude, and they like math. Yeah, go to teaching textbooks because the kid really has to dig deep to get everything out of teaching textbooks, and it might be a challenge for them. The same thing applies to CTC math that I put kind of in last place here. Matthew C in the middle of it, yeah, because it covers the auditory box super well. How about auditory with high aptitude, but they don't care. Matthew C would be your first choice because it's a kid who's going to know exactly what they have to do, and that's going to make them happy. Then you have video text interactive for an older child. This is definitely a high aptitude course. It kind of jumps around a little bit and the child has to invest a bit in it, but not too much. And then teaching textbooks be your last choice. For an indifferent kid, it might be a little more work than they want to do to really get everything out of it. Again, that high aptitude but don't like it, Matthew C or teaching textbooks. I threw that in there because frankly teaching textbooks is kind of colorful and kind of fun, so why not? If they don't like math, give it a shot. Now the kinesthetic, that hands-on learner, super specific over here, and I don't care where you're at on the spectrum, high aptitude, and actually if you go down this column, kinesthetic, Matthew C. There's just nothing else that works as well as Matthew C for any age with a kinesthetic learner because of the manipulatives and the way that all the lessons are taught using them. Super important. For a younger child, I'm also going to recommend Mequon Math because there are some manipulatives that are used. You'd see that in the teacher's manual because you're actually teaching it. So again, you can add in those things that a child would need, especially for a high aptitude, to really keep them engaged. So now let's go on to an average aptitude. Visual learner, you've got Matthew C if they like math. You could also do a standard text like Saxon. If they already like math and they're an average student, they probably won't mind all the repetition. Saxon's the kiss of death pretty much for a high aptitude because they're going to be bored to tears, but here it'll fit. Average aptitude, Matthew C, but you could also use work text for a kid that's kind of indifferent to math, who do what you tell them to do. These work texts, like I showed you the one that was Alpha Omega Science, but this is Accelerated Christian Education, Alpha Omega, Christian Light uses these. It kind of gives them a math book that's a skinny little kind of workbooky thing. Maybe it'll help the attitude just a little bit and get them more interested. If they are average and they don't like math, Matthew C is your best bet because it's going to cover the bases to make sure that they learn what they're supposed to. Now, auditory learner, average aptitude, but they like it. Hey, we're back to Matthew C again, nothing to lose there. And you could try teaching textbooks. They like math, so they'll be willing to dig a little deeper. It works better with a high aptitude, but it'll work here. Indifferent, or they just plain don't like math at all for an average student, auditory, Matthew C. Definitely going to cover the bases there. And then kinesthetic, we already talked about that one. So let's go over here to visual. This is a kid who not only has low aptitude, but strangely enough, they like math. You don't see this very often, but it happens. For this kid, I'm going to say Matthew C. Or Mequon for the lower grades, the early grades, because these are really going to hammer home mastery of the concepts. You've got a low aptitude learner, you have got to go this way. Now, mind you, when we get in this category, it's really easy for right brain kids to end up here. The right brain stuff's going to end up in a different little section in a minute here, so I just didn't put it on a chart. But this is kind of where they'd fall. For a low aptitude, indifferent, or they just dislike it, hey, pretty much all the way across, it's Matthew C. It's the only one that's going to cover the bases enough so that they can learn math. And up here, as you can see with auditory and kinesthetic, yeah, I went with the same thing as with the visual. Matthew C. and Mequon for a low aptitude, but they still like math. It's just going to give them these are going to give them the options that they need. So those are my recommendations right there. I hope that this chart is helpful to you. Now let's take a minute and talk about that right brain learner. So we're going to talk about the right brain learners now, because I've got some specific stuff for you. The person that I absolutely go to when I am trying to help a right brain learner, and by the way, one of my kids went slightly in that direction, not entirely, but I have worked with families where they have a child that is just completely right brain. They don't use their left brain for anything, and learning is really difficult for them, especially math. So Dianne Craft is a person I love. I'm going to show you a couple of her general resources here. This is awesome. This is Teaching the Right Brain Child. This is obviously a DVD, but it also comes in book form. And basically, she just walks through a whole bunch of subjects and shows you some strategies for how to teach to that right brain child to get their brain fully engaged and to get them learning. So like she goes through spelling, math, reading comprehension, phonics, vocabulary, something as simple as following directions for a right brain child. That can be super complicated, but that's a great resource. This one, Brain Integration Manual. I love this. This is a series of exercises, not kidding, things that your child can do. I don't know if how well you can see this, but we'll just show it up there. Things that your child can do with their physical body, with movement, that helps to activate the left side of their brain, so that instead of having to work so hard all the time, because everything's processed just to the right side, the creative side, they start linking the two halves together and using the left brain when they need it, like for math, okay? So those are a couple of her great general resources, but now I want to show you a math resource of hers specifically. These are right brain multiplication cards, that's right, and oh my gosh, these are fun. I'm just going to show you what I mean here. This is a right brain multiplication card. Notice the title there, Flaming Birthday Curtains. This is how we're going to teach 8 times 8 equals 64. On the back of this, there is a little story that I'm going to read you. Follow along as you look at the picture. Grandma and Grandpa had their birthday on the same day. They decided to share a cake for their birthday. They were turning 64, so they put 64 candles on the cake. When they lit the candles, the flames went so high that they caught the curtains on fire. That was the year that the firemen came to their birthday party. Okay, so you see what was going on here? Not only do we have pictures, we have Grandpa and Grandma, and they're the 8s, right? And then you have the 64 candles. You've given them a visual hook to hang on to. You've also given them an auditory / creative hook to hang on to, because you told them a story about it. So now what these kids tend to do, they will literally stash this in their long-term memory. Not kidding. They'll go right into memory. They will keep this around. So when they think about 8 times 8 equals 64, this is the mental image that comes up, and they'll remember the story, and now you've given them a hook to hang those math facts on. Super important. This is another example of one of her math resources. This actually, it's just showing the child patterns. that there are patterns here. A left brain kid will always find the patterns, and a right brain kid, it's like they can't see them. You have to show them. These kind of resources are just super important when it comes to teaching math. Now, when you get done with Dianne Craft resources, and I'm just going to highly recommend everything she does. I'm going to put a link down below to her website because she gives you all kinds of assessment tools along with products to help you, right? And all kinds, just video resources, you name it, she's got it. But when you get done with the Dianne Craft resources, which basically are going to get your kid up to the point where they can actually use the left brain and process math, then you're going to want to go to Matthew C. You want to go to Matthew C because it uses all of the learning styles, which is what a right brain thinker really needs. They need that full activation because, again, it's just not as easy for them. So that's for the right brain learner. And now I'm going to take you through a little summary. Now, I've got a couple of overall suggestions for you. These are just like if you hadn't quite figured out where your child is, or you're not quite sure what curriculum would work best, you're still not sure, I'm just going to give you a couple of hands down recommendations. The first is for young children, either kindergarten through second, maybe first through third, could be any one of those, Mequon Math. Mequon is wonderful because it's really creative in the way it presents math, and it's presenting some very advanced concepts in a way that a young child can grasp them, which helps later on. Definitely all of my kids use Mequon, and I have recommended it to many, many families with huge success. The other overall recommendation I'm going to make is for any learning style, any aptitude, any attitude, that's going to be Matthew C. If you're not sure, Matthew C. Even if you are sure, Matthew C. I just love Matthew C. because it hits all the learning styles. It's got the right amount of review because you can vary how much review is going on, and the lessons aren't super long, so you hit all of the aptitudes and attitudes of math, okay? A kid that dislikes math is going to like Matthew C. because they only have to do this many problems and not page after page. They're not being hit with review constantly to bore them if they're a very high aptitude math kid. I'm just saying, Matthew C., there you go. So I also need to remind you at this moment, if you haven't done it yet, if you got through this whole video and you didn't watch part 1 yet, well, congratulations, good job. But if you'd like to make more sense out of what you just saw, yes, go watch part 1. It's not too late, okay? So I'm so glad that you joined me today and that you watched this video. I'm very grateful. Be sure to come back next Wednesday because next Wednesday I have a very different video. It's going to be Homeschool University announcements and news. That's right. I've got some other projects going on and I just kind of want to give you guys an update on things. So be sure to tune in next Wednesday for that. So if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more, hey, go ahead and subscribe, right? Because then you'll know when I release another video. And be sure to give it a like so you can give me a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of love, right? And let me know that you did like this video. And also, we're letting YouTube know as well, and that is important. So remember, here at Homeschool University, we've got those 3 key strategies, right? We've got be practical. You know what? Matching your child's needs in math and a curriculum that's going to meet those needs. Holy cow, that's practical, okay? How about be purposeful? Pray with and for your homeschool. Really? Pray with and for your kids and for your homeschool. Whoa, that was weird. Okay, and the last one is be positive, right? Because you can do this. You can do math. You can do anything, homeschool mom, because you are amazing.
Hey now, take a step outside and seize the day.